All right. So here we are here with Mr. Kevin Short from a local organization called Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. Before we get into anything, thank you so much for being here. And would you mind just taking a couple minutes, just describing some about what Kentuckians for the Commonwealth is and what you all do?
Absolutely. Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, it's a organization that's been around for about 40 years now. And most of all our time and energy is dedicated on serving the public around us. We have been broadly defined as a social justice and social service organization, but we've really found a redefined purpose since the pandemic began. And that is a focus on the mutual aid model.
Got you. So if you could you just define what mutual aid is to you and how it's been used by Kentuckians for the Commonwealth recently?
Sure. To me and to the organization at large, I think mutual aid can be defined as service with a deliberate collaboration with the community that needs assistance. With the pandemic in mind, KFTC has put a lot of time and effort into using our connections in marginalized communities to connect with leaders in the communities and give assistance in the form of manpower and money to local causes. Given that, the one thing we've really tried to put an emphasis on is giving a platform to city and county-based organizations. Because we are a statewide organization, we know that it is extremely tough for us to be able to notice the nuance and needs in communities, let alone address them. On our website, we have a list of mutual aid resources and locally led efforts to really redirect those looking to access or give mutual aid organization to something that is more local. Because really, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, mutual aid is all about knowing and connecting to a community, which is really tough with a small organization like ours that is focused on statewide issues of inequality.
Definitely. That makes total sense. With that in mind, what makes you and Kentuckians for the Commonwealth believe that mutual aid is the most effective form of giving? Or do you believe in the first place that mutual aid is the most effective form of giving?
Well, it's really tough to define most effective. I guess I would say yes, just because of how targeted the giving can be with community involvement. But there are times where there is not as much involvement that is needed as much as places just need more relief, which is in healthcare centers.
That makes total sense. Broadly, what do you think the goals are of Kentuckians for the Commonwealth with mutual aid in mind and the pandemic in mind?
Well, we want to make sure that every day Kentuckians can go through their day without sweating the small stuff. Really, it's a basic human right to have access to things like food and water, and access to masks and other personal protective equipment is vital with this pandemic still going on.
Yeah, definitely. Can you talk about any major challenges that Kentuckians for the Commonwealth have faced in their work, both inside of and outside of the mutual aid framework?
Without getting too partisan, we are in a state where the political climate is not too gracious towards what might be viewed as handouts. We have faced a lot of pushback through our history with an agenda that has been focused on protecting human rights and trying to ensure equal protection under the law. With mutual aid specifically in the work that we have focused on since March of this year, it's been hard just identifying need. I talked some earlier about how we've shifted our focus onto supporting local organizations. One of the big issues we ran into early on in this pandemic is not necessarily the gathering of money or resources, but rather where the money and resources ought to be distributed to. Should they be going to the big cities where there will be the most people affected, or should they really be going to rural communities in Kentucky where there will be less people that actually get the disease, but where there may be need for more support with a lack of healthcare infrastructure? And that there is kind of the nature of the beast in Kentucky. You have really urban areas and really rural areas. As a statewide organization, deciding where and when to give support is a constant struggle.
Definitely. We see that just in Lexington, with Lexington being relatively urban, and then the areas around, immediately around Lexington being kind of on the more rural side. And, of course, we see that in South Carolina, too, with South Carolina being really similar to Kentucky in that way. So can you talk some about how Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, and maybe you individually even, overcome that dichotomy of urban versus rural?
Well, uplifting local voices. I've touched a little bit already about how we've tried to put an emphasis on local mutual aid efforts, but those are really almost exclusively in Lexington and Louisville. I'm from a small town called Lilly down in southeast Kentucky, and we would never have a mutual aid organization. With that, it somewhat falls on the shoulders of organizations like ours to try and reach out to those individual communities to understand their wants and their needs and what kind of support they need in order to overcome their issues.
Definitely. I completely understand that. I know you said you didn't have too long, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but can I ask what might be coming and what's next for Kentuckians for the Commonwealth as the pandemic starts to, hopefully at least come to a close here within 5-6 months?
Well, sadly, the ramifications of the pandemic will stretch for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we may not be getting any new cases doesn't mean that there won't be support still desperately needed. With that said, we're starting to get ready to release our policy platforms for the upcoming Kentucky State Legislature session, and we're getting ready to mobilize around the state to fight for human rights and well-being.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I know you got a packed schedule. Have a great day. I appreciate it.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Definitely.